What's good, YouTube? It's your boy, Blue Blood Sports TV, back at y'all with another one. So, undefeated, three-division world champion, former junior welterweight undisputed world champion, and currently the WBO welterweight world champion. Widely considered the pound-for-pound best fighter in the world, Terence "Bud" Crawford will be making his ring return November 14th against former IBF welterweight world champion, British superstar boxer, Special K, Kell Brook. With that said, I wanted to discuss this fight, this showdown, what it means for Terence Crawford. We understand what it means for Kell Brook. It's the opportunity at a world title. It's the opportunity at a big payday. And it's the opportunity for him to rectify his career. Kell Brook hasn't fought a real meaningful fight since losing to now undefeated, unified WBC, IBF welterweight world champion, superstar boxer Errol the True Spence Jr. back in 2017. With that said, he will have the opportunity for a title shot against Terence Crawford and a big fight and a big name. Some say is the best fighter in the sport of boxing. So he has a huge opportunity in front of him. We understand what this means for Kell Brook. But what does this mean for Terence "Bud" Crawford? This is the definition of a trap fight. Why is this a trap fight? Because the biggest rival right now, the biggest fight in the sport of boxing currently, is Terence "Bud" Crawford versus that of Errol the True Spence Jr. And obviously, Terence Crawford is going to be compared to Errol Spence in this fight with Kell Brook. Now, I don't know the location of this fight, but Errol Spence went to the UK and Kell Brook was the IBF champion when Errol Spence fought him back in 2017. Obviously, that's not the case with Terence Crawford. But he's fighting a week before Errol Spence, as Errol Spence has a highly anticipated ring return against a very, very formidable foe in former two-division world champion, former junior welterweight unified world champion, and former WBC welterweight world champion, Danny Swift Garcia. So, Danny Garcia is definitely the higher profile fight, right? Because Danny Garcia is still more credible today's time. He's still more relevant than Kell Brook today's time. Not to take anything away from Kell Brook, but Danny Garcia has been in big fights recently. After his loss, his first initial loss to Keith one-time Thurman, where he lost his WBC title in a unification bout, where the WBC and the WBA titles was on the line. He lost the belt to Keith Thurman. Then he lost the vacant WBC fight against Showtime Sean Porter, who's now a two-time welterweight world champion. But Danny Garcia is still the higher profile fighter. He's been in more meaningful fights as of late than Kell Brook. But like I said, that fight between Errol Spence and Danny Garcia is going to take place November 21st, just a week after Terence Crawford and Kell Brook, November 14th. So there's going to be a lot of buildup. There's going to be a lot of comparison, obviously, because that's the biggest fight in the sport. But the huge thing is, Errol Spence went to the UK and beat Kell Brook 3 years prior. Now, Terence Crawford is going to have to show up and show out. Everybody's going to be expecting Terence Crawford. He's fighting Kell Brook. Kell Brook hasn't fought at the welterweight limit since fighting Errol Spence in 2017. And like I said, he hasn't been in a meaningful fight since 2017. Now, he's had 3 fights since then. He's tested the injuries that he suffered against Gennady Golovkin and Errol Spence, and those injuries have not resurfaced. And I don't expect them to resurface in this fight. And I won't hold those against Terence Crawford anyway. If Kell Brook is healthy enough to get in the ring, it is what it is. So with that said, Terence Crawford is going to be expected to show up and show out. He's directly going to be compared to Errol Spence fight with Kell Brook. And this is going to be a lot of pressure on Terence Crawford. One may not admit that, but it will be, because he's fighting a week before Errol Spence. He's fighting a former opponent of Errol Spence, And actually, that was Errol Spence's first opportunity at a world title. He was the IBF mandatory challenger for Kell Brook. Thus the reason why Kell Brook had the fight, hosted the fight in the UK, because he was the A-side and the champion. So this is Errol Spence's former foe, and Terence Crawford is going to be held to the standards of Errol Spence in this fight. Not to mention, not myself, but a lot of the boxing world are going to use the excuse that Kell Brook hasn't fought at the welterweight limit in 3 years, and Kell Brook suffered 2 major eye injuries back-to-back in the fight where he dared to be great, going up to fight Gennady Golovkin, and then he fought the fight with Errol Spence back-to-back. Now, it wasn't directly back-to-back, but it was back-to-back fights. He had suffered 2 orbital bone eye breakage back-to-back. Back-to-back fights, not in the same year. I think it was a year apart, but it was back-to-back fights. And so that's going to be held against Terence Crawford. So Terence Crawford is going to be expected to go into the ring and dominate Kell Brook. He cannot allow Kell Brook to go to the scorecards. He cannot allow it to be a tough fight. He is seen as the pound-for-pound best fighter in the world. Heavy as the head that bears the crown. And he's going to be expected to dominate Kell Brook. Now, why is this a trap fight? Because Terence Crawford is in a lose-lose situation. Terence Crawford dominates Kell Brook. Everybody's going to say he's supposed to dominate Kell Brook. Terence Crawford struggles with Kell Brook. Everybody's going to say Terence Crawford was exposed. So he's in a lose-lose situation. Kind of like the situation, and I say kinda because there's a few differences there, but it's like the situation with Errol Spence and Mikey Garcia. See, Mikey Garcia, the built-in excuse for Mikey Garcia was that Mikey Garcia moved up from 140 because he fought majority of his fights, his last 5 fights at 140. But they said he moved up from 35 all the way up to 47 to challenge Errol Spence. So Errol Spence was in a lose-lose situation. He was supposed to dominate Mikey Garcia. If he stopped Mikey Garcia, he was supposed to do that because he was the bigger man. But if he struggled with Mikey Garcia, he would have been exposed. Not that Mikey Garcia was a 4-division world champion, undefeated, and a superstar and a legend in his own right, but they would have said that Errol Spence was exposed if he would have struggled with him. And there he may have even lost. That could have been the beginning and the end for Errol Spence's career, because everybody would have said, how did you lose to a guy this small? So he dominated him. He was supposed to do that. And that's the situation similar to Terence Crawford with Kell Brook. The difference is Mikey Garcia was undefeated. Kell Brook has had 2 losses on his career. Mikey Garcia was injury-free. Kell Brook had 2 major injuries. Now, Mikey Garcia dared to be great. Kell Brook dared to be great, jump up 2 weight classes. Now, he legitimately jumped up 2 weight classes from 147 to 160 to challenge the unified, undefeated middleweight world champion superstar boxer, Gennady Triple G Golovkin. Mikey Garcia campaigned at 140 for 3 out of his last 5 fights. Kell Brook never campaigned at 154 before going up to 160. And he never fought for a world title. Mikey Garcia fought for a world title at 140, junior welterweight, before going up to 47. And won a world title at 140. So Mikey Garcia jumped up 1 weight class, essentially. Kell Brook jumped up 2. But with that said, Terence Crawford is going to go into negotiations with Errol Spence, at some point in time. And he's going to want to be A plus, A minus in the negotiations with Errol Spence. Right? And this pay-per-view with Kell Brook, because I'm assuming it's going to be pay-per-view, Errol Spence's last 3 fights are pay-per-view fights. So Terence Crawford is essentially trying to keep up with Errol Spence, not in the ring as far as talent-wise. We know he has the talent to keep up with Errol Spence. I'm talking about outside of the ring, the business part, because he don't want to lag too far behind because then he doesn't have any leg to stand on in negotiations. Outside of the fact that the boxing world is calling for this fight, and this is the biggest fight in the world, and he's the best or the second best welterweight in the division. So the pressure would be on Errol Spence to make the fight and, bend to some of the demands that Terence Crawford wants. But for the most part, Errol Spence will have the most say-so in the negotiations, and he could bend to his advantage. So, with that said, Terence Crawford is going to be expected to show up and show out. And we don't know what you're going to get from Kell Brook. Because imagine if Kell Brook turns back the hands of time and he looks like the Kell Brook that fought Sean Porter. Or he looks like the Kell Brook that fought Gennady Golovkin before suffering the injury, because he had much success against Gennady Triple G Golovkin before he suffered that injury. He started pouring out his eye and he wasn't the same. See, that's the tricky part. This is the trap part about it. Because like I said, Terence Crawford, we know he has the skill set, he has the boxing ability, but he can't make this a tough fight. He's going to have to go in the ring and outclass Kell Brook. And he's just going to have to deal with the consequences for fighting Kell Brook. Meaning that he's going to get some disdain for fighting Kell Brook and outclassing Kell Brook because everybody's expecting him to do so. But that's better than to struggle with Kell Brook and people feel like you're being exposed. Then Errol Spence could say, you struggle with Kell Brook, who I dominated 3 years ago and took a title from in his backyard, in hostile environment when he was still a champion. And you did so, you struggled with him when he wasn't a champion 3 years later, having fought in the division, coming down in weight after claiming. Keep in mind, Kell Brook claimed that the reason he lost to Errol Spence was due to the fact that he struggled to make 147. He felt drained, he didn't have energy, and then he suffered another injury. So he campaigned for Errol Spence to come up to 154 to give him a rematch. Let's not forget that. So now 3 years later, he's going to go back from 54 down to 47. You understand why this is a showcase fight for Terence Crawford. He must make Kell Brook look like he did Jeff Horn. That should be the goal for Terence Crawford. He must make Kell Brook look like he did Jeff Horn. He must dominate Kell Brook and stop Kell Brook, as he's supposed to, because he's the more talented fighter. And the thing about this is, he would be the more talented fighter even if Kell Brook was in his prime without the injuries and still campaigning at welterweight, because that's the type of skill set that Terence Crawford possessed. He would still be the favorite because he has the skill set to outbox a very stiff Kell Brook. His skill set is far greater than Kell Brook's. Now, this is not to take anything away from Kell Brook, because Kell Brook has a great jab. Kell Brook has great technical skills, and Kell Brook is a very big and strong strapping welterweight. But when it comes to pure skill set, pure boxing ability, pure ring generalship, and athletic ability, he can't compare to Terence Crawford. Not in his prime, not now. And this is a showcase fight for Terence Crawford, and he's going to have to make a statement. But that's all I got for y'all. Drop a comment in the comment section. Let me know what y'all think. Y'all already know what it is. It's your boy Blue, Blue Blood Sports TV. Hate, like, comment, and subscribe. You haven't subscribed, hit the subscribe button, hit the like button, hit the bell icon to get all the new notifications. Follow me on Instagram at Blue Blood Sports TV, all one word. Y'all already know what it is. Shouts out to the entire LDBC. Shouts out to New Media. Shouts out to Black Media Row. Make sure you like and share these videos. That's all I got for y'all. Peace.